You've been the pastor of Renovation Church in Atlanta since 2008, a church you planted. What would you describe as the distinguishing characteristics of your church?
Yeah, so moved to Atlanta in 2008. We had our first worship gathering actually in 2011. So I would start there. I think one of the distinguishing characteristics of Renovation is we have tried to maintain a missionary culture from the very beginning. So my wife and I moved to Atlanta. We had never lived there together. I lived there briefly when I was playing for the Falcons, but I didn't know the city. I didn't know the language. I didn't know the culture. And so we very much spent those first 3 years really learning what type of church Atlanta would even need. It didn't need another, well, I won't go into that. But, and so that's how we spent those first 3 years. And so I would think what distinguishes us is a focus on being as indigenous and communicating the gospel as indigenously as possible, and then being radically, in my opinion, transcultural, and really trying to embody as a church in our attendance, in our communication, in our group life, in our efforts, in our focus, what we would say is the full breadth of God's creative genius in our staff, in our elders, in our teams, in our leaders, all across the board.
Now, you've got a book coming out in another month, I guess?
Yeah, just about a month. Yeah.
Okay, called Renovate, Changing Who You Are by Loving Where You Are.
Yes.
And I have an advanced copy, so I've had a chance to read through that. And one of the things that you say you're mainly trying to do in that book is to develop a theology of place.
Yes.
Can you explain what you mean by that?
Yeah. I'll try to do a flyby biblical theology. So our narrative is supposed to begin in Genesis 1, not Genesis 3. And I feel like, particularly in our circles, and by our I mean Reformed or conservative, evangelical, gospel-centered, that a lot of our preaching and our practices start at the fall, not at God calling his creation very good and seeing the fall as what it is, as Michael Williams describes, as an infection, an invasion to what God described as very good. And so because of that, we really have a transience to our ministry. It's very rare to see people with the longevity of, say, Dr. Piper or other men who we admire and women who we admire that have invested for a lifetime, not only in a people, but in a place. And so for me, a theology of place beyond the sociological dynamics described there in the book is understanding that our calling is not only to see the gospel meet the sin sickness of the individual soul, but to see the church postured as a transformative agent in a community for the long term, and to see ourselves as Christians postured as a transformative agent in a community for a long term, not just looking for the short term evangelistic fruit, how many people got saved or how many people, what can we do so that this place would more readily reflect the kingdom over a lifetime, rather than looking for a quick and easy low-hanging fruit and then move on to our next ministry endeavor, which I feel like, and of course, so feel is a loaded word, but I think some data really contributes to the lack of effectiveness in the church can almost be grounded in transience as one of the major issues. And so I'm advocating for place over transience because of our theological understanding of God's delight in this material world and our theology beginning at Genesis 1, not at Genesis 3.